Hey everyone, and I am here with my good friend Danny Diliberto, who is CEO of Ladles of Love. Danny, lovely to be chatting with you again.
Morning,
Um,
mate.
all right, mate, as they say, it's been a while since we've done a podcast, and I
It
thought it
is.
was about
It has,
time
yes.
we had a chat again. As anyone will know, I have the privilege of working with Danny with Ladles of Love, and and it's been quite a journey, isn't it, Danny? It's
Yeah.
2 years we've been
Been a while.
working together. Yeah, that's 2.5 years. Time flies, eh?
Yeah.
So I thought it would be really good. You've been reading a book recently, which I know has inspired you, and you and I have done a number of talks of late based around this book. And I thought it would be great if you maybe just tell us a little bit about that book and maybe some of the key things that has really spoken to you. And we can just maybe chat a little bit about that. So, Danny, this book,
Thank you, Dave. The book is called Surrendering, Letting Go,
yeah.
the Pathway to Surrendering.
Okay, so there's a few books there, right?
So let me start again. Letting Go,
Yeah.
the Pathway to Surrendering.
Wonderful.
And
Letting go, the pathway to surrendering.
yeah,
Cool.
I believe we don't choose our books. I believe books come to us.
Mm,
And
mm,
um, I remember, well, this book, a friend passed it on to me. Um, but it's, you know what, it wasn't just passed on at any time. And it wasn't even really a friend, it was a volunteer that came to Ladles of Love. We were chatting, she's also was very into, personal growth and all that stuff.
mhm,
And we were just having a chat, and she says, I've got to share this book with you. And she did. And for me, at that moment in my life, I remember, you recall how tough Ladles was last year.
mm, mm.
We really experienced a lot of challenges. And um, I don't know if you remember when I called that meeting with you, Dave, and I said, this is what's happening with Ladles now.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and, I was, even though, you have the knowledge, but knowledge
mm,
only when it becomes wisdom.
mm,
When knowledge sinks from head to heart, then
mm,
it becomes wisdom. And that's when you start applying it in your life. So
mm.
last year, with all this knowledge, I was still wanting to control, trying to control, always going into the future, always constantly worrying, how are we going to do this? Where are we going to get the money? I
Mm.
when people ask me how you're doing, I was going, oh, it's tougher, it's hard out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was just this
yeah,
person,
yeah.
with all this knowledge and wisdom that I've accumulated in my life. I was still that person, and I just hit a breaking point. I think, uh, I don't know if we shared in the last podcast, but I believe the only time we change, so the only reason we stay where we are is because we are comfortable
Mm,
with,
mm, mm,
even if it brings chaos into our life, it's a chaos we know, so we stay with it.
mm, mm,
We fear the change because we don't know
mm,
what
mm.
if we change, what is it going to look like, so we will rather just stay with what we know. But I
Yep.
believe in life, if we're blessed, some don't reach that point where the fear of the unknown becomes less than the
Mm,
fear of the chaos,
mm,
of your
mm,
existing chaos. And at that
mm.
point you say, you know what, I've had enough.
Well, that's been so true in my life, Danny.
Yeah,
When the fear of change becomes greater than change itself, you change, right?
yeah,
And or I have a saying which I think you've heard me say: when you need to become intolerant, when you become intolerant of the present, it creates a future.
yeah.
You have to wait till you get so intolerant of
Mm,
something that you change. Yeah, I
yeah.
hear you.
So I remember the weekend. I was just like, it happened on the weekend. I just, for some reason, I had to stay indoors. I didn't want to see anyone. I really like
Mm,
isolated myself in my apartment and just spent time with Danny. And
mm,
it was at that weekend when I realized I'm done. I'm
mm,
done
mm,
worrying.
mm,
Ladles of Love is meant to survive. It will survive. It doesn't matter what I do or what I don't do. if Ladles of Love is meant to survive, it will survive. So as long as I'm putting one foot in front of the other, I'm gonna do today. I can't worry about tomorrow or next week. And that's almost, I think that's the power of acceptance.
It's also very countercultural, because we're told to push and push and keep
Yes.
pushing and keep pushing. And that, I've always said truth lies in tension, right?
Yeah.
Be content in the present, become intolerant to create a future. There's these tensions.
Yes.
And I think what you're talking about is the tension of turning up and doing the best you can in the moment for the day, and letting tomorrow be tomorrow. Is that what I'm hearing you talk
100%.
about, that tension?
I can't worry about tomorrow.
Yeah.
We don't know. We think we're in control with our life. We're not.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen in the next second. So it's really about acceptance and surrendering. And just, I'm not saying now just sit back and say, oh, it's all going to fall into place.
Yeah. We're not saying don't plan.
We don't. Yes. And we're not saying don't strategize. And we're not saying don't now just sit back and say, oh, God will provide. I'm not saying that. I'm saying still do your best.
Yeah.
But do it now.
Yes. And then rest,
Yes.
let it. Yeah. See,
when it's time to rest, you rest. When it's time to work, you work, but you work now.
Yeah.
You don't worry, oh, where are we going to get the money tomorrow?
I like that. Yeah. And that's a discipline. I mean, that is a spiritual discipline, to be at calm. I know in the spiritual discipline I was brought up in, we talked a lot about being grounded and rooted. And I remember my parents showing me a picture of a lighthouse on this rock, and all around it was this huge storm, but the lighthouse just stood still and was rooted and grounded. And, we talk about our spiritual journey. This is kind of the picture I have of becoming grounded, that it doesn't matter if there's a storm brewing, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't change me, and I think this is the pathway to that, right?
100%. And then so reading this book, I'm actually rereading it because I don't believe I've mastered surrendering, and I've learned in life you can have an aha moment. Sometimes it's very difficult to take it on because it's old habits, or the ego is not letting you let go of it, or whatever it is. So I believe and I'm not being hard on myself. I'm being aware of surrendering and just being aware of acceptance, and everything is as it is. And when the emotions flare up, being aware of them, fighting with them. And that's what I really loved. What the biggest take I've taken from this book is he, the author, I think it's Hawkins, not the scientist Hawkins, another Hawkins. He created what he called the map of consciousness.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that you put this slide up, and I'll put it into the video, and I thought it was just very interesting because it came off the back of a talk I was doing on joy. I've been talking about how to find joy in your work, and that joy is a strength. It's an energy source, and learning to tap in that. And then you said, oh, well, that's interesting because you'd learned on this chart that joy is a higher vibration or level of consciousness than love is. And I thought that was quite powerful. So take us through these levels of consciousness as you describe them.
So I don't want to call them levels. I tell you why, because when we talk levels, if we talk a higher level, we're assuming that we are better.
Okay.
And I'm always very wary of that. So I don't want to let's call it frequency.
Okay.
They vibrate at different frequencies.
Right. Like light vibrates at different frequencies. I'm with you. Okay.
Okay. So basically he took all the emotions and he gave them, he calibrated them from 0 to 1,000. Obviously, the higher the vibration, the more. So basically, you've got your dark emotions. I call them dark emotions: shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. These are all egoic emotions. They're driven by ego. So they will vibrate on a lower frequency. For example, shame, he gives it he starts it at 20. That's your lowest vibrational frequency. And then as you move into different emotions, so the frequency grows, or it's a higher frequency. I'm not saying it's a better frequency, it's just a higher frequency. But the thing is, the higher you move up these emotions, the closer you move into the more conscious emotions, right? The emotions that bring peace, that give you strength.
So this is a journey, really. He talks about a journey from shame to peace. I'm looking at the piece of paper here. Shame being the lowest one, and then guilt and apathy and grief and fear, desire, anger, pride, and then there's this transition point. And I see the transition he talks about is courage. Talk to me a little bit about that. This word courage.
So when you're in these egoic emotions, right? Ego feeds off these emotions. And the more you live life through these emotions, the stronger the ego becomes in you. So now to move out of these emotions, you need courage. And that's where he says the flip happens. At the vibrational frequency of 200, you move from dark into the light emotions. Courage. He talks neutrality, which is like, you're neutral. There's no judgment. There's you accept. Then he moves into willingness. Being hopeful, acceptance. Like I just, that weekend that I accepted.
Yes,
it was. I mean, I experienced this movement from this dark emotions into acceptance. All of a sudden my life felt light. But you see, we can have that moment. We then you constantly need that courage to stay in that place.
It's interesting what you say that, because I don't think courage, it isn't that you have courage and then you no longer need it. I think courage is a vehicle that you sit in when you go to this journey, because I think willingness and acceptance takes courage. It takes courage to accept the surroundings that you're in, right? It takes courage to love someone that you don't want to love right now, I guess. I think it takes courage to embrace joy.
So courage to change your way of thinking, Dave.
Right. I like that. So courage is a vehicle that we embrace and take on, that takes us towards this sense of enlightenment and newness, right?
Yeah, and I mean, let's try and. I know you like analogies, and you say vehicle, and let's think of a battlefield. You've got the dark warriors, the egoic warriors, the guilt, the apathy, the grief. And, you imagine they're dark, and then on the other side you've got the warriors of light, and they shine. And now we've got this. We've got these. So now these warriors of light want to take over the space of the warriors of dark. And they're going to go, no chance. I want to survive. I'm going to box with you. I'm going to put fear in you, and I'm going to put guilt in you, and I'm going to bring people into your life that make you feel bad, and I need those dark feelings to survive. So, and that's when you need this courage, this warrior, to say, no, I'm going to fight. You're not going to take over my space.
That is such a powerful illustration you've shown there, because I think people somehow think that because they've had a few days where they don't feel shame or guilt or whatever, that they're kind of gone forever, and then it smacks them in the face 2 days later when they suddenly are faced with these things again. And I really do believe that we are always in a battle. We're constantly in a battle. I think all of our lives we're in a battle. We just might be better at choosing the battle and helping it. But I love what you're saying. Never think that you completely won the war over shame, because shame is one of those things that sneaks in and then slaps you around the side of the face when you're not looking, right?
I remember reading a book. I don't know which one it was. And they say, you know, it's so easy when you're in a retreat and you can feel inspired and
Oh
you
yeah.
feel at peace. And that's great. And that's what it is, you know.
Yep.
But the true courage comes in when you go back into the world. You leave that
Correct.
retreat and
Yeah.
now you're in
Yeah.
the real world. Can you maintain that peace
Yes.
in the real world?
Yes.
And that's where
Yeah.
you need the courage. And
Yeah.
and it's like anything, Dave. You know, if you exercise, if you want to build your biceps, you got to exercise it every day. You can't just exercise it once and go, oh, I've got big muscles. but the more you exercise it, the bigger it gets, right?
Exactly.
And it's
Yeah.
the same. The more you practice that courage of being aware of your emotions and saying, oh no, that emotion doesn't serve me. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to try and push it away, but I'm aware of it and I'm not going to allow it to attach itself to me. The more you're able to move into those emotions of consciousness.
I think there's another C. You know, I like the letter C. Any word beginning with C. I think there's courage. There's another word called curiosity. And I think leadership, which this is self-leadership. This is what this is, right? Self-leadership means that these things that we're talking about don't just happen. They happen because we intentionally decide to change. Now that's self-leadership, right? And I think it starts with curiosity. You know, saying, is there a better way of living? Why am I feeling this way? You know, why do I get triggered by that event? You know, or why does this? I think we're no longer curious enough about what's going on inside this world that we live in. You know,
sorry, Dave.
we need to ask questions
yes.
of ourselves and our feelings, and I think that's where this chart is quite good, because you know we can say, well, I'm feeling this way. That's coming from shame. I'm feeling this way. That's coming from grief that I haven't dealt with. I'm feeling this way. It's coming from pride. Perhaps I need to deal with that.
But Dave, imagine. I mean, let's talk the lowest, shame. Imagine if you feel shameful of yourself. How can you feel good when you're feeling and you're thinking and you actually have no self-esteem and you're feeling? I look at it with the homeless people. I mean, they are filled with shame. They are so shameful that they will constantly self-sabotage because they don't believe they deserve better. They believe this is how we must live. I must be stinky. I don't want, you know, and then they say, oh, people don't look at me and they don't talk to me. And yeah, of course. Of course. And
it reinforces a victim mentality, doesn't it?
So, you know, for me, it's like, do we want to be, I mean, do you want to be in a space of anger? I was angry for 34 years with my father. It was a nightmare. You know, when I realized that, hey, when someone asked me, well, what can you thank your father for? Which was like, what? And I said, well, actually, he taught me the man I shouldn't be. And I was able to release that anger. It's like your life changes. You know?
It's interesting that, Danny, anger is a fuel. Is a fuel. Joy is a fuel, and there's negative fuel and there's positive fuel, and a lot of people, you know, they hang on to anger because it's providing them a reason to get up and to do things, and it provides them a focus for the world. It gives them a sense of energy. Anger does that, and that's why people struggle to let go of anger, because they'd rather feel something than nothing, right? When joy is the positive source of energy, you know, and making that transition, if anyone listening is making that transition, understanding that your anger you're holding on to is a negative energy source. It is taking from you all the time.
Makes you sick.
Yeah, exactly. And that transitioning and letting that go into joy, it's transformational.
Yes, exactly. But I want you, like you were talking, you put an angry person next to a joyful person. Now, I'm sure you've seen it before, or you've experienced it before, where a person's getting angry with you and you just standing your ground and you're saying, I'm not taking this on. I'm sorry you feel this way. And that person gets more angry.
Yes.
This person wants this reaction from you and that's all ego. That's how ego feeds. It wants this reaction from you. And when you're not giving it, you're going,
mm,
and who's the more powerful? Think
mm,
about it. Who's the more
mm,
powerful? Not the angry one.
mm,
Because the
mm,
when you're angry, you do stupid things. When you're joyful, you calm. And you know what? Be religious. Don't be religious. When you in those emotions of consciousness, you are connected to source. Whatever created you, you are now connected to source.
yeah.
There's nothing more powerful than that.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Guilt and shame are two of the most powerful and hideous emotions that human beings carry. Shame causes people to hide. People hide all sorts of manner of things, bad habits. And because shame, you spend your life living two lives. That's what shame does, and guilt reinforces it. Guilt is the prison bars that keep you there. And I think the big message of most religions, and certainly most spiritual teachers, is that we need to find our freedom from shame and guilt. And one of the ways of that is starting to learn and speak to ourselves that we are better than we think we are. We need to speak to our being and say, I am strong. I am walking in peace today. I love this thing of, we have to speak intention before we physically get there. You speak out your intention. I'm going to become joyful. I'm going to become a person of love. I will be a person of peace. And as you start to speak this, and you start to speak it out and speak it into yourself, you will find yourself starting to walk into that pathway. Is that your experience?
100%. Look at Don. I don't know if you've read the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. Powerful book.
Yes, fabulous book.
First
Absolutely.
agreement: be impeccable with your word.
Yes, yeah.
Because
power of words.
the
Yeah.
power of word is so powerful. If I constantly tell myself I'm stupid, I'm going to be stupid. If I constantly tell myself I'm going to be beautiful, I'm going to be beautiful.
Yeah. If you have someone constantly telling you you're bad, you're angry, you're this, you're that, and so we have to reverse that. And of course, I think the first person that can do that is yourself, right? You have self-affirmation, I think is powerful here. Yeah.
100%. So for me, and I don't know, what I find the challenge, because I've really, in my 20 years of personal growth, and I'm not saying I'm better, I'm just saying I've chosen personal growth. For some reason, I was able, and I did it unknowingly, I unknowingly chose courage. Because this 20 years of personal growth has been scary and beautiful at the same time. And if I didn't have the courage, I wouldn't have accumulated the wisdom that I have. And I'm not saying I'm better, but I know the man I was, and I know the man I am today. I know how I used to think, and I know how I think today. And if you ask me which man do I want to be, no ways can I go back. Am I saying that anger doesn't come up, grief doesn't, or pride doesn't come up? It does. Of course it does. But I'm aware of it. And I go, oh, there it was. Okay. It happened. But not who I am.
I love that. You've changed your identity. People who live their life for anger, they have an identity of being an angry person. They've chosen to change their identity, which I think is amazing. I think it's interesting. There's a difference, as we go right back to our beginning statement. There's a difference between knowing and to know and knowing. Often I talk to people, go, oh no, I know that. Yeah, you may well know that, but you're not walking in the knowing of it.
100%.
And I love that. It's a lived out philosophy. And so my encouragement to anyone listening here is, the books are brilliant, and read the books, but apply what you're reading. That's the discipline, is to let it sink through into your being, and then let that being start to work it out. Yeah.
And also, Dave, this is a life journey. It's not, we all want this quick fixer. This is
100.
not,
Yeah.
this is a life journey. You either walk on the path of ego or you walk on the path of consciousness. You can't
Mm,
walk on both, and you
mm,
need to make the choice. The thing is, to walk on the path of consciousness, which I can tell you is a more beautiful, more peaceful. The world is in chaos because we're
mm,
driven by anger and pride and
mm. Power.
greed and
Mm,
power, you know,
mm.
and look what it's doing to our world. Look how we are
Absolutely.
separate as human beings.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
so for me, I mean, you look at a little baby has no ego. It's not born with an ego. You understand? And that's who we are. We just freaking grow up and develop an ego. Our journey is to master our ego. And I'm not saying don't have an ego.
Mm,
I like
mm,
to smell nice. I like to be
mm,
clean. I like to
mm,
look good. That's ego. But I believe, that's a good ego,
mm,
you know?
mm.
And I don't identify it by it. And I'm not going to say, oh, because I'm clean and you dirty, I'm better than you.
Yep.
You know,
It's 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 what leads who leads who. If you allow your ego to lead you, your ego will lead you into all of these things we talked about. But it's learning that your ego is not you. There is you that is your spiritual being and your ego, and one must control the other. The ego is not inherently good or bad. It just is. But unbridled, your ego will take you into these places. And the issue
100%.
is to bring these great disciplines in there. Danny,
Mm.
it's been a fantastic conversation, and
It was.
let's do this again many more times as we do run on this journey. So once more, what's the title of this book, in case anyone wants it?
Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender.
Letting Go, The
Surrender.
Pathway of Surrender.
Yeah.
Danny, many thanks for your time, and
Thank
look
you.
forward to our next time. We'll chat soon.
Okay. Cheers.